Tita Desler, what communication strategies can we use to build trust and understanding in our relationships?
I'm going to just explain something about the brain because this will relate to what we're going to be talking in there. We need to be calm because when we calm, our brain is like this. The amygdala is not going to be picking up signals of danger. Second is very, very important.
How can you effectively manage conflicts to strengthen rather than damage the connection with others?
Never try to resolve something in the heat of the moment, because in the heat of the moment, remember, your brain is like this. It's an instinct of survival that the minute the other person had the frown or yelled or slammed the table, in 300 milliseconds, your ears or your eyes picked up the signal of danger.
A relationship educator. Tita's passion is to help people and improve their relationships. I'm Ian Bunston. Welcome to Monday Matters. Great to have you back with us again, Tita.
Thank you for having me, Ian. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you all today.
Tita, does living in times where there are greater pressures upon us, such as financial, safety, mental health, climate change and global unrest, contribute to us having a shorter fuse?
Absolutely. I think that in my line of work, I have noticed how we almost are constantly, most of us, all ages, from little kids to the elderly and all of those in between, we're living on edge. And if you would allow me, what I'd like to share with us all is why this is happening to most of us, and it's based on our brain. And I'm going to just explain something about the brain because this will relate to what we're going to be talking in the other questions that you have for me. But so I'm going to use my arm and my hand like a handout. So my arm represents your spine, which has all the nerves that go to all the organs in our body, and the brain. And I'm going to simplify to 3 parts, although it's a very important organ. But one of the many important functions that it is created to help us with is to keep us safe. And so in order to keep us safe, what the nerves that go to our eyes, our ears are constantly perceiving signals that we pass onto each other when we communicate. The way we speak, our body language, etc., is all perceived and it goes to the brain. Now, to simplify the brain for this purpose, I'm going to talk about 3 parts. If I open my hand like this is the base here of your brain. It's called the brain stem, and we call it the most primitive part of the brain that when we all were born was fully developed, because it's the part, for instance, that is going to keep us alive. All the involuntary things that keep us alive, like when we were born, nobody had to teach the baby that we were to suck from the breast or the bottle to survive and feed. Right now, it's keeping us alive, maintaining our body temperature, our heart is pumping, we're breathing, all those things is this brain stem. But this is also the part of the brain that is in charge of the instinctive survival responses that we have, which are the fight, flight, and freeze responses when we are in danger or in the perception of threat. This is all controlled here. But how does this part of the brain know if we are in danger? So if I put now my thumb like this, it represents a very complex part of the brain called the limbic part, but we'll just call it the emotional part. And in there's a little part called the amygdala, which is tiny and in the shape of an almond. And we have one on the right and the left-hand side of the brain. The right one is very important because this amygdala is where all emotions are created. Emotions is just, think of the word emotion, energy in motion. It's an energy that makes us do something. If I'm sad, it's low energy, I cry. If I'm happy, I'm smiling, singing, it's higher energy. If I'm angry, it's a puffed up energy. I'm going to slam the door or slam my fist on the table, etc. Yeah, and so, but this part is also important because from the moment we're born, I can refer to this like a metaphor. It's got like a radar that gets activated and is always scanning the environment where we are, the place where we are. It scans the person that we are interacting with. And through our body, when we say, I got butterflies in the stomach, I got a gut feeling, all that is that amygdala. That its function, apart from, is where it's a very complex thing, but I'm simplifying. It's like also the part that is going to be reading all the environment and signals to detect real danger or possible threat. Yeah, and that part is also connected with here. If I put my fingers like this part represents, it's called the prefrontal cortex, which is the logical thinking, rational, problem solving part of the brain. So right now our brains are like this, everything is connected. But if anything is perceived by our eyes and our ear, a sudden noise, the siren of an ambulance or a police car, a child screaming, etc., immediately the amygdala picks up and goes signals of danger, 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 a strange sound in the middle of the night. And in order to pick up and respond and keep us safe, immediately this thinking part needs to disconnect so that this part in 300 milliseconds, which means take 1 second divided in 300, it responds by disconnecting the thinking rational part. Nobody stops to Google or take a muesli bar to get energy if I'm in danger. We just do it instinctively. So this part in 300 milliseconds sends the signal to the brainstem, and our body in those 300 milliseconds is primed up with all the stress hormones to respond in the fight, flight, or freeze reactions. And with all the things that happen, for instance, through lockdown in COVID, in my line of work, we notice how people of all ages, we are living now like in hypervigilance. A nervous system, that amygdala, like a car alarm or a house alarm, for many people got like stuck. And we are in constant, if it's normally scanning everything now, doing it in overtime, override, if I could say like that. And that many times this reflects in an anxious behavior. So when you're saying that it's short fuse, Ian, some of us, when we are anxious and with that hypervigilance, hyper alert mode, we become more snappy, like we become abrupt or angry or start picking arguments or raising our voices more. Others go to the flight response, more withdrawn, more quiet, more don't want to be in bigger spaces, don't want to do many things. They go to the flight response or the shutdown mode. So it's affecting people in different ways. But yes, absolutely, the world we're living in and the results of the lockdowns and that has impacted how we function.
So, Tita, that was a really interesting explanation there. And I will come to asking you a little bit later in our discussion about how we then deal with the heat of the moment situation, what strategies can we employ. But before I do, when I think of relationships, the key words that kind of stand out to me are trust and understanding. So what communication strategies can we use to build trust and understanding in our relationships just generally?
Okay. The first thing that I would like to say, based on what I just explained of the brain, is you need to remain calm in order to have good communication that leads to connection, emotional connection with people. We need to be calm, because when we're calm, our brain is like this. The amygdala is not going to be picking up signals of danger. When I'm in a moment of conflict, if my thinking part is not connected and I start yelling or behaving in more aggressive manners, and that immediately sends a signal of danger to the other person. So the first thing is we need to try and stay calm. Second is very, very important. Communication happens between two or more people. And the key word I want you all to remember is a key element in communication is there's different people that are speaking. And different means different. Different doesn't mean better, worse, good, bad, right, wrong. Different means different. Therefore, we're going to be hearing different opinions, different beliefs, different values, different assumptions, expectations, experiences, family of origin, learned behavior, etc. But that just means accepting, beginning the fact of communication by understanding that there's going to be differences in the way we communicate, in the things we bring, the ideas, the opinions, etc. The other very important thing that helps start developing a trust is coming from Dr. John Gottman, who is a leader, an expert in the field of relationships, especially in couples, but this applies to what we're talking about. He has an acronym, which is ATTUNE, which means when we want to really create trust in the way we communicate, the A is for give your undivided attention. So we're not looking at the watch, we're not scrolling on the phone, we're not just answering the doorbell, etc. We give our attention. The T is for turn towards the person. Turning towards means, yes, physically looking at the person. Eye contact is very important, but also emotionally being open, being not in defense mode, but being open with that understanding. I'm going to hear maybe a very different, very, very different. We can have differences this big or this big, but it just means it's different. So turning towards emotionally and physically to the person. The U is for understanding, yeah, intellectually being curious. I'm going to be curious about, explain to me, why do you view this so differently to the way I view something? Yeah. If we follow those first three, we get to the non-judgmental listening, which means I'm just open with curiosity to hear, tell me your point of view, yeah, so that I can then share my point of view. They might be very different, but then we learn something about the other person, and then we can compromise or negotiate or whatever that's going to mean. Yeah. And the last letter is the E for empathy. So if we follow those 5 things, we can create communication that is safer. But added to the other thing that I always suggest to the people, my clients, I work mainly with couples, but it is the another intervention developed by doctors John and Julie Gottman, that it is to slow down. I don't know if it's ever happened to any of you in a conversation, we butt in immediately. We're not even listening and we just want to interrupt and, oh no, but, because we already noticed the differences and we want to interact and put my point across. So I'd say the time that you have available for the important conversation, divided into 2, and each person takes time to be the listener and the speaker. But there's some rules to this. The speaker can speak anything you want. It's your story. It's your side of the equation. So you can say anything about your values, beliefs, experience, what's shaping, what's underpinning your position, as long as you speak from the me perspective, the I perspective, avoiding using the you, always, never, those kind of accusatory, blaming words that immediately are going to trigger the other person's brain to disconnect because we feel attacked, and the person stops listening and it becomes a conflict. Yeah. So the speaker can say anything, but based on my experience, my feelings, my opinions, etc. And the listener plays a very important role. Apart from the ATTUNE acronym that I explained, the listener needs to be stopping the speaker every 1 or 2 minutes and slowing them down, ideally to avoid the interruptions. If we have a clipboard, the listener is taking notes and is paraphrasing every 2 minutes or so. He said, this is what I heard you say. To the being very picky, so that if the speaker said, I felt devastated, the listener needs to paraphrase, you said you were devastated. Because you'd be amazed how we quickly change it to, you said you were a bit upset. No, because the point of this exercise is to make the speaker feel that if this is what I said, the listener says, this is what I heard you say, not this and not this. It's exactly making the other person feel heard and understood. At the end, when the speaker has finished, the listener does a validation. And validation means a bit of a summary based on my notes, what I heard you say. And that doesn't mean, please hear me out. Validation doesn't mean I agree 100% with what the other person say. I can still disagree. But the point of this is I make the person feel heard and understood, and then we swap, and then the speaker is the listener becomes the speaker, and vice versa. So both people are giving each other the gift of feeling heard and feeling understood. So that, I hope those are tools that now you can all start trying to keep those in mind and using them in communication.
So Tita, coming back to the shorter fuse space and in the heat of the argument, and I think we can all relate to in the heat of the argument moments where we've said or done things we wish that we hadn't. How can you effectively manage conflicts to strengthen rather than damage the connection with others?
Okay, first of all, and thank you for using that expression, in the heat of the moment, please, please, please never try to resolve something in the heat of the moment. Because in the heat of the moment, remember, your brain is like this. It's not optional, it's not something we control. It's the instinct of survival that the minute the other person had the frown or yelled or slammed the table or went into shutdown or left the room or said something that we didn't like, in 300 milliseconds, your ears or your eyes picked up the signal of danger. Your brain disconnected, so you're not thinking, not rational, and the capacity to problem solve is also here in the prefrontal cortex, but it's also the part of the brain that controls our physical hearing. So we stop hearing properly. That's hence in arguments, some of us become more loud because we cannot hear properly. And here is also the part of the brain that controls the center for empathy. Empathy is different to understanding. Yeah, understanding is an intellectual part that if I get all the facts and that I can intellectualize, rationalize, be logical and understand. But empathy is trying to make the other person feel felt. I feel the pain. I feel your happiness. I feel your sadness. Yeah. When we're like this, we cannot. It's not that we don't want to. I cannot put myself in the other person's shoes. I cannot try and be logical and come up with a solution because I'm not able to. So what research has shown is that we need to slow down that amygdala. Remember, it's the radar that is scanning the room. The first step is when I start feeling, I know when I start getting triggered, I start feeling hot in the face, I start clenching my fist, and I start speaking like clenching my jaw. Each of you needs to identify what does your body do physically when you start getting triggered. Yeah, when you're running late, you're in the traffic jam, or when the person's starting to annoy you, or whatever, because those are the signals that mean alarm bells are being rang by the amygdala that says, be quick, because 300 milliseconds is very quick. But if you're not quick enough, I'm going to disconnect your thinking part, and then it's raw emotion. The amygdala is running the show in the heat of the moment. Two people or more people like this, it's just when the emotions just escalate, and then we become very dysregulated. That's when we say and do things that when the brain later on does that, we go, oh my goodness, why did I say that? I normally don't speak like that. I normally don't do that. That's when violence can happen. Yeah. And so the first thing to slow the amygdala down is when I start feeling the heat, is change your breathing. And I'm going to demonstrate a simple, you can follow me, inhale normal through your nose, and then a long exhale, like 5 seconds through your mouth, that you hear the air as if you're blowing out of a straw. Yeah, so I'm just going to do 2 if you want to follow me, just like that, simple. But can I just say the most important part, Ian? If this is not enough, and you start yelling and the other person starts yelling and you're already in conflict, that means both people are like that. So what we then need to do is to take time out. You can go like that. You can call it a chill time, a break, whatever. We need to stop the interaction and take a minimum of 30 minutes. This is proven by physiological research of the brain. That's the time it takes the body to reabsorb all the stress hormones that have caused the disconnection. In that time out, I need to find ways to help my body release all the emotion, the energy of the emotion, and the stress hormones. Ideally, something physical, like if you can't go anywhere, just do start jumps, you can do push-ups, you can walk, run in the spot, or you can go for a run. But please, let's try and make this part connect. If I'm walking, I'm just thinking what happened and how much I hate that person. I'm just flooding my brain with adrenaline. So I need to be counting the steps. Singing or humming is brilliant because that stimulates a nerve that passes our throat, that triggers the anti-anxiety system in our nervous system. So by doing that, humming, singing, I'm going to be calming myself. Whatever it is, take a bath, read a magazine, read a book, watch rubbish television that is not very taxing. The idea is connect this part again and something physical ideally. Please, gentlemen, do not use in those moments your power tools in your shed, because you're not logical, you're not thinking. And ladies, if you love cooking, do not use the biggest knife, because you could chop your fingers if you're chopping carrots. So we need to be sensible with our time out, yeah, so that it actually helps. What we're trying to do is reconnect the thinking part with this one. Only then we can speak to somebody and resolve something. Sorry for the interruption.
No, Tita, our time is almost gone, but I do want to just squeeze in one more question. Now, you've alluded to empathy, but I just want to raise the concept of kindness, but also forgiveness as well. So what part do the kindness and forgiveness play in fostering meaningful and lasting relationships?
When we are like this, when we can empathize and show that we feel what the person is feeling, that we understand what they're going through, we present ourselves from a vulnerable position. And that immediately we're sending signals that elicit the other person's brain to want to connect, to feel safe to connect with us. And so that creates that sense of trust, that I'm safe. If I present in a vulnerable way, the other person's going to feel that they can be vulnerable. They're going to open up instead of two people in guarded position and protection mode trying to communicate. And obviously, if we are showing with vulnerability, that also elicits the capacity that if the conversation is about something that I did that was hurtful, I'm able to humbly come and say, can you please forgive me? Or tell me what is it that I did, and then offer the apology. And the other person, in a less guarded way, receive the apology. And that's what we do our repair in a moment of emotional disconnection. And all that goes together with being able to do it, but not when their brain is disconnected. We need to be able to be connected so that the empathy is available to us.
Tita Desler, relationships educator, keynote speaker, and a number of other talents and things that she does. Thank you so much for being our guest here at Monday Matters today.
My pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity.